I'm angry because this can't be keto.
Hi guys, welcome back to Cjsketokitchen. If you are looking for family-friendly home-style recipes made ketogenic, then you've come to the right channel. Tonight we are going to be making something really fun. It is going to be Keto Cinnabon Cake. So come along with me and let's get started. Please give this video a big thumbs up. That lets YouTube know that other people would like to see our content. You're going to need to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. So to begin the cake part of our Cinnabon cake, we are going to begin with our dry ingredients. So in a medium-sized bowl, I have 1 cup of almond flour. Now I am making this recipe to fit an 8x8 baking dish. If you are going to take this to a gathering or if you have a large family, you could easily double this recipe. So once again, that is 1 cup of almond flour. To that, I am going to add 1/4 cup of coconut flour. Now I'm adding coconut flour for texture. It's going to give just a bit of dryness to our dough. And that is what I'm calling this, because even though it is a cake, this first layer is going to create almost like a dough, like you would in a traditional cinnamon roll. So our next ingredient to go into our dry ingredients is going to be a little bit of natural sweetener. And I have 1/4 cup of natural monk fruit erythritol sweetener. The final dry ingredient is going to be 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Now I'm going to take my bamboo fork and gently sift these dry ingredients together. That ensures that we don't have any lumps of leavening within our dry batter. No one wants to bite into a clump of baking powder. Okay, so that is our dry ingredients, and I'm just going to set that aside for a moment. So now we are going to move on to our wet ingredients for this portion of our Cinnabon cake. So I have 1/4 cup of coconut oil, and I have melted it. You could use refined or unrefined. Either one works well in this recipe. You're also going to need 2 eggs. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my coconut oil. I'm just doing everything here in my little glass measuring cup. You are also going to need 1/4 cup of sour cream, and you want to use full fat sour cream for this. I'm also going to be putting in a little bit of vanilla extract, and I want about 1 teaspoon or a couple of squirts because I have a squeezy bottle. I'm just going to go ahead and start combining this so that our wet ingredients are a little bit combined before we add them into our dry ingredients. Okay, so I am going to add the wet ingredients that we combined into our dry ingredients, and I'm just going to combine them until they're moistened and a dough has formed. So I want to mention at this point, for our Cinnabon cake, your batter is going to be incredibly thick. This is correct. You want it to have this level of viscosity. As I mentioned before, it is almost more reminiscent of a dough, like a traditional cinnamon roll would be, and that is what we are going for. So don't be alarmed if your batter is very thick. So as I stated before, I am going to be making an 8 by 8 size. So that is what I have here, is an 8 by 8 baking dish. I have placed parchment paper in mine, and I have also put my clips on to hold the parchment paper inside. You don't have to do this. You could liberally grease your baking dish. I happen to prefer the ease of removal and cutting when I use parchment paper instead, because then when our cake is finished, I will be able to just lift it out, peel it back, and cut it into even squares, and that is what I prefer. So I'm going to be putting my batter into the bottom of this, and I'm going to be pressing it down evenly as possible. So you can see it is incredibly thick. And that is really what we want. So I'm just going to take my clean hands and start pressing it around into the bottom of my dish, just as evenly as you can. And then I'm going to take my spatula and just smooth it out a bit. It doesn't need to be perfect, because the next step that we are going to do is going to slightly undo all of this. Okay, so I'm just going to set that aside while we create our second layer. So the next part of our Cinnabon cake is going to be the best part, in my opinion, and that is the cinnamon layer. So you are going to need 6 tablespoons of melted butter, and that is what I have here. To that, you are going to need a 1/2 cup of brown sugar alternative. I'm just going to lightly stir the brown sugar alternative in. And now we are going to add the cinnamon, since this is a Cinnabon cake, and cinnamon is the star. So it's best to use really good cinnamon if you can, as fresh as you can find. And mine happens to be Saigon cinnamon. So I am going to be using 1 tablespoon, you heard that correctly, it is a tablespoon of cinnamon, and that is because this is a cinnamon roll cake. The final ingredient of this second layer is 1 tablespoon of almond flour, and that is just going to give us a little bit of heft to our liquid here. It just helps it to spread a bit better and gives it a little bit of thickness. So I'm just going to combine this with my spatula. Okay, so there's our cinnamon sugar layer. So back to our cake. I am going to slowly pour this over the top of our cake. And then when I am done with that, I'm going to take a butter knife and I am just going to combine it a little bit. It's not going to be thoroughly combined and it will look lumpy, and that is how it is supposed to look, so don't be alarmed at that. And just use your rubber spatula to get all the good stuff out, because this is the most delicious part of this, is the cinnamon sugar. Well, and maybe the icing. So as I mentioned, I'm going to take my knife and I'm just going to do a little swirl effect. And that simply helps our cinnamon and sugar and butter to get in through all the layer of the cake. Just like you would have if you had taken an actual cinnamon roll dough and spread it on and then rolled it up. And then I'm just going to kind of smooth everything back down. But as I stated before, this is going to have a lumpy appearance, and that is completely fine and is to be expected and actually desired. Okay, now it's time for this little beauty to take a ride in the oven. And we are going to do 350 degrees, and I'm going to do 30 minutes. Now your cook time will of course depend on your personal oven, and also if you're choosing to make the smaller size or if you will be doubling the recipe. But I have found that for my particular oven, about 30 minutes is the correct time. So I'm going to test the doneness of the cake. Just be aware that because it has a buttery cinnamon sugar filling in it, that you might come up with a bit of that on your toothpick, but it is still done and you don't want it to be overcooked because you want that slightly gooiness of a cinnamon roll with this cake. So it came out mostly clean with just a little bit of the cinnamon on it. So it's ready and I'm going to get it out. And that's what it looks like. So I'm going to let it sit here for just a few minutes. The last step that we are going to do is we're going to put our cream cheese glaze on there. But you do want your cake to be warm when you do that, not flaming hot, not directly out of the oven. Probably about 10 minutes after you've taken it out, because you still do want it to be warm to put your glaze on. That's what they do with cinnamon rolls, so it's similar with this cake. Okay, it is time for the final flourish of our Cinnabon cake, and that is the icing glaze, which is some people's favorite part of a cinnamon roll. In fact, sometimes you can ask for extra. And the best part of this is you get to control how much you want to put on. So, what I have here is 2 ounces of incredibly soft cream cheese. So if you have not let your cream cheese sit out to room temperature, you can always pop it in the microwave for a few seconds. But definitely keep an eye on it because it can liquefy pretty quickly. So mine is incredibly soft and has been sitting out for quite a while. And once again, that's 2 ounces. Into that, I'm going to add just a tiny bit of squeezy sweetener because I don't want this to be very soft. Remember, we do indeed have our cinnamon sugar swirl in our Cinnabon cake, so we aren't really looking for a great deal of sweetness. We're looking for more tang in this particular part of the cake. So I'm just going to put in a tiny little bit. The other thing that I'm going to be putting in is about 2 ounces of heavy cream. And this is basically just to help thin it out a little bit because we want this to be more like a glaze or an icing and not a frosting. If you wanted to use confectioner's sugar in here, natural sweetener, in the powdered form, and make it more like a frosting, you absolutely could, but that is not what I wanted for my particular Cinnabon cake. But as always, do whatever you prefer. I'm also going to add just a squeeze of vanilla extract. I'm just going to stir this around until I achieve the level of viscosity that I'm looking for. Now I'm going to add just a tiny bit more cream to mine because I do want it to be a bit thinner. Okay, so my glaze is ready to go. I'm just going to bring my cake up here and spread it on. So my pan has cooled sufficiently so that I can handle it, but it is still warm, and that is what you are looking for when you put on your glaze. You do still want it to be a bit warm so that it spreads around and is fluid enough. So I just spread it around all over the cake. And I will be cutting it in 2 squares in just a few minutes, and then CJ is going to give us a taste test. Okay, here is our delicious sugar-free Cinnabon cake. Much easier than cinnamon rolls, but just as tasty. And CJ is going to tell us what he thinks. Hi.
Hi.
So we're not walking in the mall,
Yeah.
but it smells like cinnamon here.
Yeah, it does. I'm angry because this can't be keto. You're trying to sabotage my keto diet. Well, this is really good.
Good.
Lots of flavor. Again, I seriously wouldn't know that this was keto or anything. I would think that this is, and it does taste to me like what I remember a Cinnabon tasting like. Really good. That center cinnamon crusty stuff, it's good too when you get a bite of that. Good job, baby. Sorry. Good job, baby. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.